Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to 1500 Words. It's a new podcast that we've been developing here at Calvary Chapel of Johnson County, and we are in episode number 3, so we're moving right along here. I am Pastor Jared Clements, and this week I really thought we'd start off right away where we left off in our last episode. We were talking about the woman at the well in John chapter 4, and how the Lord offered to give her a drink that would truly satisfy her soul. And it is said that every one of us has a God-shaped hole in our hearts when we're born. It's a hole that humanity tries to fill with all kinds of things, from money to alcohol and drugs like it was for me, to friends, family, and houses. And really, people try to put all kinds of things in that God-shaped hole that we have, but sadly, the hole is never satisfied. All the things we try to put into it only leave us feeling empty. And that was certainly what I experienced in my life. As we pick things up in my testimony this week, all I can say is that I was empty, and that I was seeking for something, that I knew there had to be more than what I was personally experiencing in life. I did want to briefly say that as I've kind of thought about things and prayed about the podcast, I've really decided I'm not going to spend time on discussing the experiences that I had with drugs and alcohol, but I did want to share some of the things that happened as a result of my choices and my use. My junior and senior year of high school were just a brutal mess, to be honest with you. I was arrested on 4 separate occasions in 2 years. My life had zero self-control. I refused to listen to anyone, like I said previously. And once I discovered drugs, it was just an all-out dedication to using them and abusing them. And I can remember I had a group of friends that were in my class, and slowly but surely I remember that they were distancing themselves from me. I left those that were my friends and began to run around with people that were like-minded, that were into drugs and alcohol, and who really accepted me for who I was. And you know, I did surely have some fun times and some adventures, but the end result of my choices led to great difficulty. In particular, my family relationships went downhill, and I can look back on my life now and see that I lost a lot of time with my parents. And I lost time with my brothers, particularly my younger brother who was still in the house. Really just didn't have much of a relationship with him during those years. For 2 years, I was constantly on probation. After my first arrest, I received 6 months of probation, and I had to check in regularly with someone. Oftentimes, I had to take urine screens and the whole process of being on probation. I was also court-ordered to see counselors. I believe I had some community service during the first arrest. Just lots of things that I was required to do. And obviously, I remember waking up feeling pretty terrible from the effects of my decisions from the previous day. And you would really think that the negative consequences would have gotten my attention, that I would have been able to see that I was slowly destroying my life, and yet I was just utterly blind to that. Really, as the Bible says, I was sold as a slave to sin. I was a captive to drugs and alcohol, and it was quickly destroying my life. I can remember many times turning to people and saying, "Hey guys, this is the last time for me. After this, I'll never use again." And, you know, within 24 hours, I was right back at it. I was just really and truly a slave to those things. Just to briefly describe the arrests that I faced in my life, my first arrest was underage drinking. My second one was actually throwing a smoke bomb in a store. I was arrested for that, and they actually threatened to charge me with arson. My third arrest was running away from home in a stolen car. And finally, the last time I was arrested, my senior year, was a possession of marijuana on school property. And this was actually a pretty serious offense to be caught with anything on school grounds. Usually when I got arrested, it served as a way for me to start over, to kind of have a clean slate. And so in my life, I would oftentimes have a running list of lies that I had been building on over time. And so when I would get arrested, I found that I was able to confess all my lies and get things back to a clean slate again. And then I would slowly over time start to develop more lies from scratch. I think the most difficult arrest that I went through was probably, for my family to go through and myself to go through was probably when I ran away. It was a very difficult time, and I did want to share a little bit about that. I had finally gotten a little bit of freedom and was allowed to go outside of my house. I was on an informal house arrest where I had to give my schedule to a probation officer, and I was expected to keep that schedule and to be in the house pretty much all the other times. I didn't have free time. Well, I had finally earned myself a little bit of freedom to go and see friends, and I had a girlfriend at the time. And it came about that through that interaction that I was able to get a hold of some drugs for the first time and to use for the first time in a while. When I got back home, she actually called me and said, "I'm running away. I'm going to steal my mom's car, and do you want to come with me?" And you can ask my mom about it, but I didn't think very much about it at all. I quickly said sure. And I really honestly didn't think she was going to follow through with that. But suddenly at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, she showed up, knocked on my window, and I grabbed the few things I had packed and jumped out the window, and off we went. And when we got in the car, we actually made the decision that we wanted to go to the ocean in California. And I think we had about $20 or $30 in our pockets. We had decided we would grab whatever we thought we could sell for money, and off we went. And so as we traveled from Indiana to California, we quickly realized we didn't have enough money and we had to steal gas. And it happened to be before the times that you had to pay before you pumped it. So we could actually get out, pump the gas, jump in the car, and take off. And we did that all the way across the country. We were able to pawn a few things off in a pawn store, but I remember we went to several of them and they wouldn't pawn stuff to us because we were underage. When we got to California, we realized that we had a problem because in California they had already adopted that you have to pay for your gas before you pumped it. And so that was a big problem for us because we had no money. And in our intelligent brains, we said, well, let's turn around. We'll drive all the way back to Indiana. We'll get our paychecks from our workplace, which was Hardee's, and then we'll drive back to California. And so that's the plan we came up with, that we were going to come back, and we just assumed we would be able to pick up these paychecks without any problem. When we were outside of Lincoln, Nebraska, however, we had stayed all night at a rest stop. And the next morning, as we were getting ready to leave, my girlfriend decided to call her brother. That's who I believe it was her brother. And she talked to him for a few minutes, letting him know that we were okay. And we didn't know this at the time, but the police had actually tapped the lines of family members in case we called or someone that had taken us might have called them. They had no idea where we were or if something bad had happened to us, but they had the phones tapped. And so the police intercepted that call. So while the call was being traced and she finished up, we packed up our stuff and left that morning and got on the interstate. And I was actually in the back seat. I was laying down in the back seat. My girlfriend was driving. And all of a sudden she said, there is a cop directly behind us. And you know, I said, hey, no big deal. Cops drive all over the place. Just get off at the next exit. I think the exit was a few miles down. And so she got off at the exit and she said, well, the cop is still following us. And I said, oh, no. I said, okay. I said, we'll turn left at the stoplight. We'll go to the gas station. And as we were on the way to the gas station, she said, he's still following us. And so I told him, I said, we're done. So we pulled over into the gas station, and he followed us and put his lights on. And remember, I was in the back seat, so I couldn't see what was happening. So after several minutes, I heard on the loudspeaker, passenger in the back seat, raise your hands up. And so I did that, and then they said, slowly sit up. And then they had me get out, and when I got out, I saw a ring of police officers around me with their weapons pulled. They dragged me on the ground and arrested myself and the others who were with me. And you would think that that would have been pretty upsetting. The whole situation would have really gotten my attention, but the reality was that I just didn't really care. We ended up in a place called Boys Town in Omaha, Nebraska, and our parents actually had to fly out and pick us up. And I'll just never forget how sad my mom was on the airplane ride home. I remember her just looking out the window. I remember that my dad picked us up, and I was just acting like everything was normal. I was talking about the dog. I was talking about coming back home. And then something odd happened. My parents should have turned right onto a certain road to get home, but instead they went straight. And it got quiet in the car. And my mom said, well, Jared, we need to let you know that you're not coming home with us. You're going to a juvenile detention center. And I remember that was a definite moment of defeat for sure. I think I said something like, I expected that. But off I went to a juvenile detention center for a few days. I believe it was 3 days. And then I had to go to court. And that was extremely embarrassing. I was in an orange jumpsuit. I had chains on, and I had to go before a judge. And the reality is they probably should have made me stay in jail for some amount of time longer to allow things to sink in, but they did let me go home. So that whole situation was leading into my senior year in high school. And it was the very beginning of the school year. And I think one of the reasons that they let me go home was because they wanted me to get into school to try to finish. I remember that they really wanted me to be able to get my high school diploma. I remember when I came back to school and I went back, that I was really applauded for the things that I was doing, that people were saying what a great thing it was, that I was willing to throw off the authority in my life and do whatever I wanted. Some people, I remember saying that they wished they could do the same thing. And you can imagine that really pumped up my ego. It really emboldened me to continue to live a foolish lifestyle. And that was certainly a greatly difficult time in my life. It was self-inflicted damage to myself. And I couldn't see it at the time, but the Savior was working in my life. Everywhere I turned, people were telling me about Jesus. People would say, if you'll just get your life right with him, that he would set me free. And I probably thought, free from what? I didn't think I was in bondage to anything. I didn't think I was a slave to anything. In fact, I thought I was living a free life. I couldn't see a need to be set free. And I'm so thankful that Jesus didn't give up on me at that point in my life. He certainly could have done so. But he kept seeking me, and he kept looking for me to come home to him. And that's where we'll stop for today. I'm so very thankful that wherever we are in life, no matter how far we are from Jesus, that we're just one step away from being right with him. If we'll just make that choice to turn towards him, he'll begin to immediately work in our lives and set us on the straight path. May the Lord bless you today, and may he keep you, and may he just continue to work in our lives and help us to be a light to a world that has no hope. May the Lord bless you.